Hi guys, welcome to lesson 2. We will, we will talk about the apology. But this apology is the apology of Socrates by Plato. You can find here the full speech of Plato. You can click here and you will go to a YouTube page to listen that. Before to continue, I want to let you know that every class video you will find under the online sessions. So this is the class video of lesson 1, the previous lesson. So let's begin then. As I said before, this is the defense of Socrates by Plato. The apology. Let's read some of them. Plato's Apology is an account of the speech Socrates makes at the trial in which he is charged with not recognizing the gods recognized by the state, inventing new deities, and corrupting the youth of Athens. Socrates' speech, however, is by no means an apology. In our modern understanding of the word, let's say apology derives from the Greek apologia, which translates as a defense or a speech made in defense. Thus, in the Apology, Socrates attempts to defend himself and his conduct, certainly not to apologize for it. For the most part, Socrates speaks in a very plain, conversational manner. He explains that he has no experience with the law courts and that he will instead speak in the manner to which he is accustomed, with honesty and directness. This is very important. He explained that his behavior stands for a prophecy by the oracle at Delphi, which claimed that he was the wisest of all men. Recognizing his ignorance in most worldly affairs, Socrates concluded that he must be wiser than other men only in that he knows nothing. I'm pretty sure you know this quote: I only know that I know nothing. Or fictional in Game of Thrones, quote by Jon Snow, his girlfriend, you know nothing, Jon Snow. This is a quote very famous. Okay, let's continue. In order to spread his peculiar wisdom, Socrates explains that he considered it is his duty to question supposed wise men and to expose their false wisdom as ignorance. This activity earned him much admiration among the young audience, but much hatred and anger from the people he embarrassed. He said they contempt, as the reason for his being put on trial. So then Socrates proceeded to interrogate Meletus, the man primarily responsible for bringing Socrates before the jury. This is the only instance in the apology of the Elenchus, or cross-examination, which is so central to most Platonic dialogues. His conversation with Meletus, however, is a poor example of this method, as it seemed more directed toward embarrassing Meletus than toward writing truth. So, in a famous passage, Socrates likens himself to a Gelfid stinging the lazy horse which is then in state. Without him, Socrates claims, the state is liable to drift into a deep sleep. But through his influence radiating, as it may be to be some, it can be awakened to productive and virtuous actions. Sadly, Socrates is found guilty by a narrow margin as is asked to propose a penalty. Socrates jokingly suggests that if he were to get what he deserved, he should be honored with a great meal for being of such a service to the state. Yeah, I agree. On a more serious note, he rejects prison an exile offering perhaps instead to pay a fine. When the jury rejects his suggestion and sentences him to death, Socrates stoically accepts the verdict with the observation that no one but the gods know what happens after death, so it would be foolish to fear what one doesn't know. He also warns the jury who vote against him that in silencing their critic rather than listening to him, they have harmed themselves much more than they have harmed him. We can assume these words are very, very deep. So we have next video, some breaking news. I know you will like them. So let's watch.
And welcome to First Person Philosophy News and our commentary on the 4th century BC trial of ancient Greece's OG philosopher, Socrates. Today we're going to ancient Athens, where Socrates is fighting for his life and the reputation of philosophy everywhere. We expect to interview Socrates in just a few minutes, immediately after he finishes making his defense. With me in studio is Dr. Christopher Annandale from Mount St. Mary's University. Welcome to First Person Philosophy News, Chris.
I'm happy to be here, Mike.
Before we discuss the events of the trial, I'm curious to learn your expert opinion. There's a rumor that one of Socrates' young followers plans to publish his eyewitness account of the trial. What do you think of this plan, Chris?
I find the idea intriguing, a philosopher commenting on a philosopher. I think a faithful account of the trial would be a great read, but I think the author should rethink his proposed title. The apology might make people think Socrates is sorry for what he's done, which is not at all the case. Rather, given Socrates' character, I think it's more likely he will passionately defend himself and the practice of philosophy, while ironically actually goading the jurors to find him guilty.
Yes, that's just one reason why I find Socrates so interesting. So let me set the stage. Socrates is a 70-year-old citizen with a mixed reputation in ancient Athens, one of the most powerful and influential cities in the ancient world. As is the practice in democratic Athens, Socrates is being judged by 501 fellow citizens, who collectively will determine his future. Socrates faces two sets of charges, which are known as the old and the new accusations. The old accusations, presented by Anytus and apparently long known by the people of Athens, are that Socrates A. uses rhetorical tricks to make weak arguments appear strong, B. that he studies things in the sky and below the earth which have no relevance to normal life, and C. that he teaches the same to others.
If we're to believe the false but all too common misperception, it sounds like Anytus is charging Socrates with being a philosopher.
Agreed, but is it a crime to be a philosopher? If so, we're in trouble ourselves. Nevertheless, the new accusations presented by Meletus are that Socrates is A. guilty of corrupting the young, and B. that he does not believe in the gods.
These are serious charges, Mike, which Socrates must address if he doesn't want to lose his life. Atheism just isn't a viable personal option in ancient Greece, since atheism threatens the well-being of everyone in Athens. If even one person in the city dishonors the gods, Athena and the other gods could pull their blessings from the city, which no one wants to see. Likewise, although the adults of Athens might be able to withstand or ignore Socrates' questions, every parent I know will do whatever it takes to protect their children. If the prosecution can prove Socrates is corrupting the youth, many will jump at the chance to kill him.
So which do you consider the more dangerous charges, my friend? The old or the new?
Clearly the old. Although on the surface the new accusations contain the more dangerous charges of corruption and atheism, I think Socrates can successfully refute both of those charges. More importantly, Socrates can respond directly to Meletus and the other new accusers. But Socrates can't so easily refute the widely accepted judgment that he is a busybody and a crackpot. Honestly, can anyone overcome such long-term bias? And although no one today gets put to death for simply asking questions or talking about virtue, the political climate in Athens is set against Socrates. He has to be careful in this trial if he wants to win.
Sorry to interrupt you, Chris, but our producer is telling me that the first phase of the trial is over and that Socrates is now available to talk to us about his defense. Let's go live to ancient Athens for an exclusive interview with Socrates. Socrates, thank you for meeting with us today. How is the trial going, and how are you holding up?
Well, my accusers are persuasive speakers, yet hardly anything they say is true. One of their biggest lies is that I'm an accomplished speaker. But I'm only eloquent if you call truth-telling eloquent. You see, I've never been to court before, and I'm nothing like my accusers, who play with words and fancy legal phrases to mislead others. All I can do, which is all I ever do, is to speak the truth in the ordinary language I always use. I trust the jurors will not look down on me for my simple manner of speech, but will instead concentrate on whether what I say is just or unjust.
Don't worry, you'll get a fair hearing from this audience, Socrates. So let's start with the old accusations. What of it? Do you talk about foolish things, making silly arguments to defend the absurd, and then teach those things to others?
No, not at all. This is nothing but malicious slander. The people of Athens are my witnesses. They know I don't discuss foolish things that are above the heavens and below the earth. Yet some people believe these lies because they have grown up laughing at false characterizations of me by Aristophanes and other comedic playwrights. How can I refute this false reputation, especially when most of my judges have unreflectively accepted these lies since childhood? It's like fighting shadows.
Socrates, Chris Annadale here. But aren't you a teacher? Aren't your critics right to say that you teach a special kind of wisdom to the young men of the city when you talk with them in the marketplace?
Dr. Annadale, hey, great to talk with you again. I wish the circumstances of our conversation were better, but I am no teacher, for I have never charged anyone a fee for any so-called wisdom. Perhaps the prosecutors have mistaken me for a sophist, those wise men who charge a fortune to instruct the sons of men with more wealth than sense.
That's true. You're no sophist since you seek the truth. But then, how would you respond to the widely held opinion that you are a busybody? Most of our audience seems to think your reputation must have some basis in fact. Don't you claim to have some special wisdom that other men lack?
Perhaps you and others might think I'm jesting, but my reputation is caused by possession of a certain kind of human wisdom, although I lack the kind of wisdom that is divine.
I'm curious, how did the jurors respond? Did they think you were boasting?
Yes, they did. I told them a little story, one that involves a trustworthy witness, the god at Delphi, to explain my connection with wisdom. I would tell it again, but I'm sure to be boring you. I don't want to burden you listening to an old man.
No, you're not boring us. Please continue.
Okay, only if I'm not being a bother. Well, the story starts with Sheriphon. Do you know him? Okay, no? Well, alas, he's dead now. But we were great friends since our youth. And many years ago, he went to ask the astute oracle at Delphi a question. All right, please don't think I'm out of line here, but he asked if any man was wiser than I. And the oracle said no one was wiser.
Really? That's quite a compliment.
Well, I'm not so sure. I know that I'm not that wise at all, but we all know the oracle cannot lie. So I thought to myself, what could this riddle mean? Well, after some time, I felt compelled to investigate this claim. I realized that I could successfully refute the oracle by finding just one wise man. So I immediately went to an important government leader who many thought to be very wise. When I questioned this man, I discovered he was not wise. And when I tried to show him why he was wrong to think himself wise, he came to dislike me.
That's not too surprising. No one likes for someone to point out their ignorance in public.
I thought it quite strange. Nevertheless, I realized that I was wiser than this man in one respect. It seems that neither of us know anything worthwhile, but he thinks he knows something when he does not, whereas when I do not know, I do not think I know. So I admit that I am wiser than he is to this small extent, that I do not think I know what I do not know.
What happened next?
I systematically investigated other men, more politicians, the poets, the craftsmen, all of whom had reputation for being wise. But what I discovered is that those with the highest reputation for wisdom were often the most efficient, while those who were thought to be inferior were more knowledgeable. As a result of this investigation, I became quite unpopular, and many mistakenly thought I claimed to possess a wisdom that I proved others did not have. Not at all. I actually think that the god of Delphi wanted to make another point clear, that human wisdom is worth little or nothing, and that the god used me as an example, as if to say, this man among you mortals is the wisest who, like Socrates, understands that wisdom is worthless.
That certainly is a new and insightful way of defining wisdom. What next?
So I continued this investigation, this mission from God, to seek out anyone who thinks himself wise and show him that he is not wise. Young men follow me of their own free will and often imitate me and try to question others, for there is no limit of men who think they have some knowledge but actually know very little or nothing. The result of all of this is that those they question are not angry with themselves, but they're angry with me. And these many ambitious and violent men are the ones who brought me to trial today and attacked me with lies and false accusations.
Socrates, that's a fascinating story. Perhaps there is a special kind of Socratic wisdom in knowing that you don't know. I wonder, however, if the jury will agree. But for now, I'd like to follow up with a few questions.
Of course, there's nothing I like more than good dialogue.
Thank you. So here's the thing. Aren't you rejecting the wisdom of others too quickly? Aren't many of the writings of the poets, like the books of the great Homer, filled with wisdom? And don't the craftsmen possess wisdom because they know how to make many beautiful and fine things?
The poets, unfortunately, can't explain their poems. They do not write with knowledge, but by some inborn talent and by inspiration, like the prophets who say true things without understanding what they say. The craftsmen do have knowledge of crafts I don't know, so in that sense, they are wiser than I. But like the poets and other popular heroes, like actors and athletes, the craftsmen think they are wise in all things because they can do one thing well. But they aren't truly wise. If you were to ask me if I preferred to be as I am, with neither their knowledge nor their ignorance, or to have them both, I know my answer. I'd prefer to be as I am. I'm wise because I don't think I am wise.
Now, Socrates, would you mind talking about the new accusations presented by Meletus? How did you defend yourself against the charges that you corrupted the youth and that you are an atheist?
Oh, quite easily. I first questioned Meletus, who was very reluctant to talk with me in court. Surprisingly, he testified that I alone corrupt the youth and that every other citizen of Athens makes the youth better. Now, a simple analogy made it clear how little he knows or cares about the youth. Meletus admitted that it is not the case that every person can properly train a horse, but rather only a select few. So, most men actually corrupt horses because they are not experts and they cannot train them properly. Likewise, the majority of men corrupt the youth, and not just me, as Meletus erroneously said. I think the jury understood that Meletus has not thought seriously about the youth and that he doesn't care about their well-being, but only about blaming me.
Very interesting. But what happened next in the trial?
Well, I made a stronger argument. Meletus claimed that I corrupt the very youth that spend time with me in the marketplace. But that makes no sense. Why would I willingly corrupt those who are close to me, since the very people who I apparently made bad would certainly come to take advantage of me?
It would be like releasing poisonous snakes into my own house.
Exactly. Does Meletus think I'm so foolish to willingly desire my own destruction? No. It is obvious that if I corrupt the youth at all, it must have been done unwillingly. I then reminded Meletus that the law demands that the willful corrupter be taken to court to be punished. But if someone corrupts the youth unwillingly, the law doesn't require you to bring such person to court. Instead, the right thing to do is to instruct those who unwillingly make mistakes. But you must know that neither Meletus nor anyone else took me aside to inform me I was unwillingly corrupting the youth. And why is that? Because they actually know that I have never corrupted the youth. Meletus doesn't care about the youth of Athens. He only wants to find a way to turn the jury against me. And honestly, if I corrupted the youth, there would be witnesses against me, wouldn't there? Either the young men who are now old enough to speak in court for themselves, like Plato, or their fathers like Crito or others. But Meletus brought no witnesses against me, which proves I did not corrupt the youth.
But Socrates, what did you say about the particular charges? Are you in fact an atheist?
I was surprised when Meletus charged me with absolute atheism. When I questioned him on the matter, he made it clear that he thinks I don't believe in any gods.
What? Do you mean to say that Meletus did not explicitly charge you with failing to believe in the gods of Athens, Athena, Zeus, and the others? Does Meletus actually imagine you don't believe that the sun and the moon are gods?
That is exactly what he said, which is ridiculously easy to refute. First, it is clear that if someone like me believes in spiritual things, such as the children of gods, then they must also believe in the gods themselves. After all, how could there be spiritual things without the cause of the spiritual things?
How can there be kittens without cats, rain without rain clouds?
Yes, it's so obvious. And second, I clearly believe in spiritual things, as witnessed by my service to the god at Delphi. So the conclusion follows necessarily, I am not an atheist.
Socrates, what do you think is really motivating this animosity towards you? Is it simply because your questions revealed the arrogance of others? I think you did the politicians, the poets, and the craftsmen a huge favor when you helped them discover the truth, that they did not know the truth. Now, thanks to you, they have the opportunity to learn from others and to discover what is real, true, and good. Isn't such a journey better than living a lie?
Very much so. I just made this exact point during the trial. But I don't know if the jurors will accept my argument. But to be honest, many in Athens don't appreciate philosophy. They think it's a waste of time and impractical. Many through the years have actually asked me if I am ashamed of being a philosopher, a philosophia, or lover of wisdom. They wonder why I persist in searching for wisdom, especially when that very practice of philosophy may lead to my own death.
Okay, but what do you say next?
Well, I explain I don't think we should live our lives thinking about death. Instead, I say we should think about our actions and if what we are doing is right or wrong, if we are living like a god or a bad person. Excellence and virtue are the only things that matter in this life. The truth of the matter, my friends, is that when a person takes a position he thinks is best, he must hold his ground and face the danger without a thought of death or any loss. I mean, who knows? Death could be the greatest of all blessings for man, and yet almost all of us fear death, even though we know nothing about the underworld or what follows for us.
Okay, Socrates, I understand you have no fear of death, but isn't that boast a little dangerous? Doesn't it just encourage your jurors to vote to kill you? Wouldn't it be safer and a whole lot wiser just to stop being a philosopher?
Oh, I am surprised you suggest such a cowardly thing, Dr. Miller. If Annius or Meletus were to offer to acquit me on the condition I stop practicing philosophy, I would tell them I will obey the god rather than them. As long as I draw breath and am able, I shall not cease to practice philosophy and to exhort all I meet not to care for their body, wealth, reputation, or honors, but instead to seek the best possible state of their soul and to find wisdom and truth. No practice is more valuable.
Did the jurors agree that you were doing them a favor, teaching them a valuable lesson?
No. They thought me arrogant and laughed at me when I told them I was God's gift to Athens. But Athens is like a great and noble horse asleep in its stall. I am the biting pest sent by the gods to shock mighty Athens out of its moral stupor. Wake up, Athens! That's what I'm here to say. And if my mission annoys them all, and if they kill me for it, fine. I will continue to follow the inner voice that compels me to persuade you to care for virtue. I don't do this for my benefit, but for theirs. In fact, my great poverty proves I have never asked or taken a fee for sharing this truth. In this way, I think my work as a philosopher in service to the God is a great blessing for Athens, and for this course of action, I'm willing to face death many times. I hope the jury will not be angry with me for speaking the truth, but I understand that no one can oppose the crowd or fight to prevent the many unjust and illegal happenings in the city without facing death. But I will not yield to any man who tells me what to do what is not right, even if I should die at once for not yielding.
Socrates, you are an inspiration to many. Thank you for joining us today and for speaking your mind so clearly. I hope you have successfully persuaded the jury to acquit.
Thank you for having me, but I need to stress that I did not respond to the ridiculous charges leveled against me in order to win the trial. My goal, as always, was to teach and persuade the jury to live virtuous lives. For that reason, I hope they don't do violence against their oath of office by finding me guilty.
Once again, Socrates, thank you. Well, Chris, what do you think? Knowing the people of Athens as well as you do, does Socrates have a chance of winning?
I think he's proved he's not an absolute atheist. If that's the charge, he's not guilty, because Socrates is strongly motivated by a spiritual sensibility. But I think it's important to note that Socrates never claimed to believe in the gods of Athens. He may actually be that kind of atheist, and certainly some of the jurors will not like that. They may vote to convict just on those grounds.
But what about the corruption? Did Socrates prove that he did not corrupt the youth of Athens?
I'm not sure. I like his horse analogy, but I don't know how far it will carry him. He might not be the only person who corrupts the youth, but that doesn't mean he isn't one of their many corruptors. I was more impressed with his skillful use of several disjunctive syllogisms, but that's no surprise coming from Socrates, who is a master logician. Although the arguments he gave are valid, that is, the conclusion necessarily follows if the premises are true, I'm not sure they are sound. Why? Because a fool would likely corrupt those close to him. I personally don't think Socrates is a fool, but I fear many of the jurors do. I also think it's very possible that many in Athens may think Socrates unwillingly corrupted the youth, but they didn't think it was possible to change his ways without something as severe as a trial. So in both arguments, even though they are valid, the second premise may be false, which means we logically don't have to accept Socrates' conclusion that he does not corrupt the youth. Unfortunately, since some of Socrates' premises might be false, I worry that Anytus and Meletus might just win their case.
And what about the long-term bias against Socrates and all of philosophy? Can Socrates actually defeat this invisible foe?
Well, Socrates certainly didn't win any friends by saying he was God's gift to Athens. Many people have felt the sting of this gadfly, and they are not grateful for being woken up. However, you have to admire Socrates' courage. He was known to be a brave soldier when younger, and he showed his courage today.
I was very inspired by his witness to the truth. As philosophers, we too search for truth and strive to live virtuously. But I've met too many people who simply live for pleasure, wealth, and power. So it all comes down to the jury. Have Anytus and Meletus successfully tapped into the long-standing bias against Socrates, or will Socrates' appeal to truth win the day? Any last thoughts, Chris?
I think Socrates has a chance to win, but it's unfortunate that he depends upon the people of ancient Athens to make the right choice. They have all too often proven themselves to pick the easy over the right.
So dear viewers, make sure to look out for our next video to find out what happens next. We will be reporting the news once the jurors announce their decision. And if you found this video interesting, please give us a like and subscribe to First Person Philosophy. And don't forget to check out Dr. Annandale on his YouTube channel. The link is below. Many thanks. Peace. Welcome back to First Person Philosophy News for our coverage of Socrates' trial in ancient Athens. Socrates recently presented his defense against two sets of charges covered in an earlier video. With me in the studio is Dr. Christopher Annandale. Are you interested in learning the jury's decision?
Absolutely. We haven't had this much suspense about an outcome of a trial since the debate over whether or not to accept the Trojan horse.
Unfortunately, Socrates is not available to join us at the moment, but we do have news from the trial from an eyewitness to the events, a young devotee of Socrates. Thank you for joining us, Pluto.
You're welcome, and it's Plato. The jury has made a terrible decision. They just voted to
Wait,
convict Socrates.
what's that? I can't quite hear you. Did you just say your name is Plato?
No, it's Plato with a T. But the thing is, the jury just voted 280 to 221 against Socrates. Socrates appeared surprised that the vote was so close. Just think, if only 30 votes were switched, Socrates would now be free.
Hold on. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around the idea that someone would call their son Plato. I mean, I understand Pluto. He's the Roman god of the underworld, after all. But Plato? Hey, what do you think, Chris?
Plato is an unusual selection to be sure. Call me old-fashioned, but I prefer the classical names, and I don't understand the modern attraction of naming children after colorful modeling compounds.
Guys, stay focused. My name is Plato. It's a nickname. It means, never mind. It does not matter. The jury just voted, and Socrates was found guilty. I personally think Socrates was successful in his refutation of the arguments that he is an atheist and that he corrupted the youth, like me. I suppose the long-term bias against Socrates and philosophy as a whole was too much.
Yes, Plato. This is troubling news. What happened after the jury announced their vote?
Following our legal tradition, the prosecution presented its argument for their preferred punishment, death. Socrates, then, was allowed to present his preferred punishment.
Well, what of it? Did Socrates argue against the punishment of death?
Well, not exactly. He instead explained that he deserved a hero's reward, like the kind Athens gives to its Olympic heroes. Free meals for life.
What? Doesn't Socrates understand that the jury just decided that he has committed crimes against the city? How can he expect that they would now want to reward him?
Socrates is convinced that he has been a great benefit to the city, since he has spent his whole life urging all to be as good and as wise as possible, and to not foolishly focus on wealth, pleasure, or power. The victor of the Olympic Games makes everyone feel happy, but Socrates gives you the tools you actually need to be happy if you listen. He's the one who deserves the city's thanks.
Well, Socrates might be convinced that he never willingly harmed anyone, but the jury obviously disagreed. Did Socrates suggest other, more reasonable penalties?
Yes, he briefly considered imprisonment, banishment, and a fine, but he rejected all of these punishments as impractical and ineffective.
As much as I hate to admit it, I have to agree. Many would think imprisonment to be a great punishment, but prisoners are in fact given free food for the rest of their lives, which Socrates might like. And considering Socrates' advanced age, he won't need food for much longer.
But why not banish Socrates, or make him pay a fine? Certainly Socrates must understand that these punishments are preferable to death.
Socrates explained to the jury that forcing him to leave Athens wouldn't really solve Athens' problem. If he went to another city, the same problems would certainly develop there. And honestly, who do you think the leaders of that city would blame? Athens, for not taking care of the problem as they should have.
Okay, but why not just fine Socrates? Why not just hit him where it hurts and make him pay?
But Socrates cares nothing for money. And, even more importantly, he has none to give. Socrates did offer to pay 1 mina, about $10,000 in your currency. That is a sizable fine for someone as poor as Socrates. But many others in Athens, myself included, volunteered to pay a much larger fine on his behalf. We collected pledges up to 30 mina, or over $300,000. But I fear the jury listened to Socrates and understood that he wouldn't feel the pain if we spent our money to save him.
I just can't help but think this problem just goes away if Socrates agrees to just stay quiet and to not ask so many questions of others.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, but Socrates very strongly rejected that option. Instead, he repeated his earlier claim that he cannot obey the god and stay quiet. Socrates is passionate about this point. Our greatest good is to discuss virtue daily. He actually said, an unexamined life is not worth living. Now, he's not saying that non-reflective people deserve to die. Instead, he's claiming that non-reflective people aren't really living, at least not the kind of life that makes us human.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Plato, but I'm receiving word from our producer that the jury has made their announcement. They voted for the punishment of death. We are now joining live coverage of Socrates, who is making comments to the press from inside a temporary holding area.
Oh, that sure didn't take the members of the jury much time. Now they will have to bear the responsibility of killing me when they could have just waited for nature to run its course. Honestly, some might criticize me for not pandering to the jury and begging for my life by mentioning my 3 young sons, but I would rather die with my defense than live as a coward or say or do anything to avoid death. It's easy to avoid death, my friends, but it is much more difficult to avoid wickedness, which runs faster than death. I am old and slow and have been caught by the jury, but my accusers, so clever and sharp, have been caught and condemned by wickedness and injustice.
Socrates, what message do you have to those who voted against you?
I'll offer a prophecy. I say that a vengeance will come upon them, which will be much harder for them to bear than my suffering. They condemn me, hoping that my death would spare them from having to give an account of their lives. They wanted to escape judgment for not living in the right way. But I maintain that the others who are younger than me, who I restrained but they did not notice, will now take up the challenge, and they will find their questions more difficult to ignore. I urge everyone in the time you have left not to ignore such tests, but to prepare yourself to be as good as possible.
Socrates, are you worried that a bad end will fall on those who supported you?
No, but I imagine my friends are worried that I've handled this trial all wrong. I want to tell them to be at peace. I often receive warnings from the divine voice inside of me telling me to stop when I'm about to do or say something foolish. But I didn't hear that voice of warning at any time during the trial. And why is that? Because what happened today may be a good thing. Those who believe death to be evil are certainly mistaken.
Mistaken? What proof do you have that they are wrong about the evil of death?
As I mentioned in the trial, death can only be one of two things. Either death is the end of all perception, and the dead have no awareness of anything once they die, or death is a journey. It's a journey of the soul from this place to somewhere else. If death is a lack of perception, then it is like a dreamless sleep, which is a great benefit. Why? Because the best sleep is the one in which our rest is so complete that a night goes by in an instant, without awareness or pain. Who would not prefer a very deep sleep over any day filled with toil or a night filled with restless dreams?
But death can't be a good thing. Think of all the loss death brings. It must be avoided at all costs.
No. If death is like a dreamless sleep, then it is a great good, since in death we will not be aware that we are dead and missing the joys of life. And if death is a journey to another place, can there be a greater blessing? There we will sit before upright judges and keep company with great people like Homer, Ajax, and Odysseus. Who would not enjoy spending their days in pleasant conversation with such people? I could spend my time examining them and learning if they are truly wise. What extraordinary happiness it would be to keep company with them. So either way, if death is like a dreamless sleep or a distant journey, it is a good thing. So what has happened today is a true blessing. A good person cannot be harmed in life or in death if they have lived their life well.
So just for clarification, so you're not upset about being condemned to death?
No, my good friend. I am certainly not angry with those who condemn me or those who accuse me. How can I be, since they have brought me to this good point? They tried to cause me pain, and for this, they deserve blame. But I only have one request for them. Please, when my sons grow up, I beg of you to question my sons if you think they ever care for money or anything else more than they care for virtue, or if they think they are somebody when they are nobody. Reproach them as I reproach you if they do not care of the right things. If you do this, then you will have treated both me and my sons well.
Socrates, it's time to go.
I need to leave. I go to die. You go to live. Which of us goes to the better fate is known to no one except the God.
Remarkable. I'm at a complete loss of words, Chris. Are you able to share your reaction?
I think Socrates has a wise response, Mike. A virtuous person has nothing to fear in death. But I think it is important to point out that although Socrates' argument is a valid disjunctive syllogism, it will only produce a certain and true conclusion if, like Socrates, you have lived a virtuous life. Both good and bad people, but maybe especially bad people, would benefit if everything just disappeared at the moment of their death. All suffering ends, and once again, they wouldn't even know that they are missing life, since all is snuffed out. But only virtuous people will likely enjoy life in a world after death. Socrates didn't directly mention the possibility, but I imagine most of us wonder what kind of life we might enjoy in the afterlife. It of course could be pleasant, as Socrates described, but the ancient Greek tradition, as well as our Judeo-Christian tradition, speaks of another kind of afterlife, which is filled with suffering that does not end. A life in some kind of hell sounds very much like a bad thing, and so the idea of death would reasonably terrify all unjust people. As a result, Socrates' argument about death doesn't work for all, but only for the good.
An interesting point, Chris, and one that we all must consider as we form our character by what we say and what we do. Unfortunately, our time is up all too quickly, and I need to send our viewers off to enjoy our evening's primetime lineup. And please don't forget to like this video and to subscribe. We appreciate you recommending our videos to your friends and helping our channel grow. Signing off for First Person Philosophy News. Peace.
It'll be a long time before we see a philosopher of Socrates' caliber again.
I'm surprised to learn that hemlock is so poisonous. I mean, it's all natural, right?
That young Plato shows a lot of promise. I think he's destined for great things. I hope he stays in journalism.
That was hilarious, isn't it? Very funny. I'm pretty sure you liked it. So before we finish, we have some questions on Forum Lesson 2. We have 3 questions. What is the principal question with which Plato's apology of Socrates deals? What does the word apology, apologia, in the title mean? What are the 2 forms in which Socrates makes his offense? So we have 3 questions. I would like to know what are your answers. So we can finish this lesson with the next summary.